And we are live. Today, I have a very special guest on the podcast powered by UC Sports Media. If you don't follow on Sports Night content yet on Facebook and all different platforms, we have a website as well. Make sure you go do that right now. Today, I'm joined by Fago Franklin III, the most versatile man you could argue in sports media. So thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, man.
Yes, sir. So I just wanted to get a little bit into where your career started at. What was your first gig in sports media?
Oh, man. So I'm going to just take you a little bit down my journey a little bit. So basically, I went to college when I was 19 years old. I actually wanted to be a graphic designer, but things didn't work out. And I was just trying to figure myself out. So I decided to take a break from school. So 5 years later, I'm like, hey, I need to get myself back into school. At first, I wanted to become an English professor because I love poetry. My favorite poet of all time was Emily Dickinson. And somehow, some way, like, again, as I told you before this, I'm a man of faith. So I asked the Lord, I'm like, hey, Lord, could you give me a career where I don't feel like it's just a job? It's something that I'm very passionate about. Ironically, I was always into sports. I played sports since I was 6 years old. I played football, I ran track, I played basketball. My icebreaker to males is always sports. So it was crazy because when I got myself back into school in 2012, I was offered an internship in Lacrosse We Trust. That was my first internship. And I was a transfer freshman. And so it was like, I didn't know too much about lacrosse, but it gave me a challenge. And so I love the research. I love doing research and investigating different things of that nature. And it was like sports. So I'm like telling people like, this is what's going on with lacrosse, da, da, da. And I love transcribing articles as well. So it's like, oh, man. But I'm not even going to lie to you. After that was over in 2013 was like my biggest break. One of the news stations called Pro Players Insiders, they work closely with the NFL. So my editor, she gave me a call and she was like, hey, Fago, we need you to do content writing for 3 months, even before we put you out in the field. So I'm like, all right, cool. And I actually looked them up. Man, that was the greatest thing I ever did in life because they was going to Super Bowl every year. So my mindset was like, oh, they go to a Super Bowl every year. That's going to be me. Why not me? So I was working with them and I was working with 3 other different companies. Doing content writing. And in 2015, I was working with Latage Magazine. And that's where I really blew up because I just started covering a lot of the pro events. Like my first NFL game was the Steelers versus Vikings game in Canton, Ohio. So not only was that my first game, but that was my first game covering the Hall of Fame, which was crazy. I mean, I was right there beside Chris Carter, Randy Moss, Ben Roethlisberger. It's just like, oh my gosh. And so after that, it just gave me that feeling. So I covered like Miss America. I covered, the Carolina Panthers, the Charlotte Hornets, any and everything that I have covered. And I used to not only cover one event each, like every weekend, it would be like 2 to 3. So it'd be back to back to back. There was one time in North Carolina where I covered a PGA Tour, a tennis tournament, and as well as a Carolina Panthers, all in North Carolina. But it was just crazy. And you have to have, like I tell people all the time in this industry, what separates you from everybody else? I'm hungry, and nobody's going to stop me from getting from point A to point B. And so while I'm looking at, because at the time I was still working with Pro Players Insiders, like on and off with them for 6 years. My big break with covering Super Bowl was in 2018. I'm a diehard Philly fan, so I got the opportunity to watch my Eagles win the Super Bowl in person, which was crazy.
It was crazy. I had an internship, like I told you before we started the podcast, with 97.3 ESPN South Jersey, and I used to transcribe interviews for Sal Palantonio, and it was quite the experience. That was my idol growing up, definitely one of my idols growing up, like I said, and he kept harping in on it every single day. I would go there for my internship, Thursdays and Fridays. He would be talking about how the Eagles will prevail without Carson Wentz as the quarterback and how they were going to push through, and a lot of people are sleeping. So I know the game of football very well. My dad being a football coach, and I've coached some various NFL players and everything. But it was really tough for me to swallow that pill. I had just bought Seahawks, or right before the Seahawks game, I had just bought playoff tickets for $300. So, and Carson gets hurt the week after I buy those playoff tickets. So it was really tough. But like I said, those guys just really instilling the faith in everybody. And it was a great experience. And having an internship and being that connected, and then also being able to watch one of your childhood teams go and finally win the Super Bowl for Philadelphia. We don't have to describe that. That's a whole nother day, a whole nother story. You know what I mean? That type of feeling for Philadelphia sports fans. But it was just a great feeling. That was just a great day. And not only just in the sports world for Philadelphia, just in Philadelphia in general, it really brought people together.
Yes, and I'm one of those people that did not believe in Nick Foles by any means, because if you look at it, we didn't have that chemistry, and then we barely won against Atlanta, and you had Julio Jones on the outside at the 1 yard line, and you throw a fade route.
Not to cut you off, I'm in the stadium in the back corner. They threw the ball to the opposite direction of the back corner of that end zone. All I see is Julio Jones go up on, I think it was Ronald Darby at the time, because the following season, it actually happened. They played opening night, and that was like the weather delay and like whatever. The game started at 9 p.m. The same exact play happened to end that game too. Julio goes up for a pass, and I'm like, all right, we got lucky last year. You know what I mean? This is not happening again. And then somehow he was carried out of bounds and didn't come down with it. But just that feeling being in the stadium with all those intense fans. Like I said, I just had bought in the playoff ticket and thought I was beat on it. Nick Foles in the playoff run after this had 2 touchdowns, I think, between the Bears and Saints games, and four picks. So really, he was kind of riding off the momentum of the season before. But just that feeling of just seeing one of the best players, not only in the league in itself, just of one of the greatest receivers of all time, going up on a mediocre. Everybody knows the mediocre secondary for the Eagles. Yeah. It was tough, but it worked out.
And so let me ask you this. How do you feel about Nick Foles going to the Bears? Do you think he's going to actually be a success story out with the Bears organization?
Where I start with that is I can't fully address Nick Foles first. I just have to address the Bears whiffing so hard with Mahomes on the board. And I would be wrong to tell you if I thought Deshaun Watson was going to be this good in the NFL and Patrick Mahomes, but taking Mitch Trubisky starting 13 games in college and taking him number 2 overall, you saw the third pick too, Solomon Thomas, who if you watched any of my podcasts or listened to any of them, I freak out on every time because he's like the most not talked about bust in NFL history, in my opinion, where you see they draft Nick Bosa last year at number 2 and they go from the 2nd overall pick to the Super Bowl. So I just think as a whole, they had to do something to really try and motivate Mitch Trubisky. So I don't know if Nick Foles is actually going to be the starter, but it's funny, his last playoff win for a guy that is successful, like a guy that I know personally well, Joe Flacco, a very good playoff performers. His last win was in Soldier Field, and it was the double doink game. So, but with all that being said, Nick Foles, I think he's really there, like I said, to just try and push and motivate Mitch Trubisky. But if Mitch Trubisky can't get it together and it really starts to struggle again, you have to look at what you got in Nick Foles for sure.
And I definitely agree with you on that aspect as well. I think they have 11 tight ends.
Oh yeah. I actually like the pick because I actually I grew up a huge Notre Dame fan. Cole Kmet, I really think he's a talented guy, but you just signed Jimmy Graham in the offseason. Maybe it's more of a mentor role. But I do like the pick because he was the best tight end on the board, and getting him at the in the 40s range, I think it was 42, I believe correctly. That is good value to be able to pick up the best tight end. You saw some of those positions, like my favorite position growing up was running backs, and I value tight ends too a lot because they can be H-backs in the backfield. They line up on the wing of the line of scrimmage, or they can be inline blockers, or you line them up in the slot like Jimmy Graham was with the Saints, and he was trying to push for the tag to be a wide receiver tag instead of a tight end tag because he thought that was his value, which he was pretty correct in that. But I feel like those positions with guys like that, tight ends and running backs, there could be some special talents that you find later in the draft. It's just teams are so dead set on the important positions like pass rusher, quarterback, and left tackle and offensive line in general that kind of and secondary that those guys go under the radar a little bit. But that roster, I mean, you see that defense. That defense is ready to go at all times. You got Khalil Mack, who I remember Khalil Mack was put on the scene when he played against Ohio State at Buffalo, and he just was absolutely terrorizing, single-handedly terrorizing. I'm talking tackling quarterbacks, sacking them, picking up the fumble, and taking it to the crib type stuff. And we're like, who's this number 40-something dude on Buffalo? So when you have a defense like that, and especially the secondary and just all the veterans on that team, it's really, really surprising that they're not able to be competitive, or I should say more competitive than they are. But that comes down to the most important position, and that's the quarterback position. So if you can't get that right, then you're probably not going to have too much team success. Although they did make it to the Super Bowl versus the Colts with who? Rex Grossman at quarterback. You know what I mean? So I think anybody other than Rex Grossman is a upgrade. So, but they just got to put it together and learn how to play team ball, and really, it's going to be a big job on Nagy to just get that team going and really overcome what they have at the quarterback position.
And I definitely agree with you on that aspect. And of course, looking at the draft, I was surprised that the Packers took a quarterback. What are you actually telling Aaron Rodgers? Are you telling him like, hey, this is going to be the future, or we need to move in a new direction? After, the next 2 years, if you don't do too well in the playoffs, we're moving on without you. So what are you exactly telling Aaron Rodgers? That's what I got. I didn't get that. He needed help.
Exactly. And a lot of people want to kind of compare that to the Jalen Hurts 53rd overall pick situation, which I think is asinine, in my opinion. You draft, so your opinion on it is you draft as a GM, you draft Jordan Love to be Aaron Rodgers 2.0. But if you look at the bigger picture, you have Aaron Rodgers 1.0 in his prime, and he's coming off an NFC Championship berth. But if you saw the statistics, he's thrown one touchdown pass in his career to a first overall or a first round wide receiver. And not only did they draft Jordan Love at 26, which a lot of people are caught up on, they kind of snuck in A.J. Dillon from Boston College, power back, when they already had one of the best duos. They had the running back that had the most rushing touchdowns in the league. And they had an extremely good backup who could be arguably one of the best backups in the entire league. And you go out and get a power back after you didn't get a wide receiver in round one in one of the most historic wide receiver drafts. And that gets to the point of hitting on with the Eagles. Carson Wentz, I love Carson Wentz as much as anybody. I think he's one of the most talented guys. 2017, like we talked about with Nick Foles, he's not getting put in that position or even getting there without Carson Wentz help in the regular season. And Russell Wilson, it took him until week 17 to break the record of who had the most touchdowns in that season. And Carson had it and broke the franchise record. And that was like week 12, week 13 versus the Rams. So I like I said, I love Carson as much as anybody else, but the reality is in the past 6 playoff games, which is 3 years, 2017, 18, and 19, he's played 9 total snaps. So it obviously took me a little bit of time to cool down after that pick. It was a really hot pick. No one saw it coming besides my guy, Brian Baldinger, who actually said a month before that he would literally use his 53rd overall pick on Jalen Hurts. So that guy does a lot of work, and he's actually one of my idols as well. So shout out to him, and he knows his stuff extremely well. And it took, like I said, it took me a little bit of time to cool down about that. But then I'm thinking it was never about, oh, he's going to come in and take Carson's spot. It was more so we need insurance. Do you want another 40-year-old coming off the bench, signed in August of 2019, scoring 9 points at home in a playoff game? I appreciate McCown's effort, but in reality, he's in that realm of Ryan Fitzpatrick, of being a bridge quarterback career-wise and never really having a lockdown job. And he's 40 years old. You know what I mean? So he's also limited in himself. And you saw he's limited where he's pushing himself so hard, he tears his hamstring. So I appreciate his effort, and he stayed in the game with the torn hamstring, and I really appreciate his effort. But just the reality of the situation is you don't want to have that happen to you again. And the same people that are going to be questioning that pick now are going to be the same people that are going to be loving when Jalen Hurts gets in if Carson ever was to go down again. So, and another thing to add value to that pick is 53rd overall pick. A lot of people, there was already 4 quarterbacks taken off the board. Jordan Love was somewhat a shock. The other 3 we all knew was going to happen. We knew Joe Burrow was locked in at number 1. We knew Tua was most likely going to Miami, just whether they got anxious and traded up for him, or Justin Herbert came before him, or just however it played out. We had 3 in the top 10, top 6, more importantly. But being the 5th guy, Jalen Hurts, value, you have those guys already off by the first 26 picks. And 26 plus 26, 52. You just double that. And then add a pick, 53, bam. If Jalen Hurts gets any experience, and like I said, it's very likely with Carson Wentz's injury history. He's only missed 8 games in 64 career games, but they've been some of the most important games. So if he ever gets experience and you can flip him, what did the Eagles get for Sam Bradford 6 days before the season? A first-round pick from the Minnesota Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
So if you turn that flip, you draft him at 53 and you're able to flip him in the future and he has some experience, you're most likely getting at least a second-round pick, which that was a back-end second. It was like 11 picks away from the end. Or you get a first-round pick and you get even more value for the pick that you picked him at. So that's what I've always saw with that pick. And I never really wanted to compare it to the Packers because I just thought it was a completely different situation.
Okay. And while we're going to keep it here with the NFL talk, let's swing it back to like the fans. Do you actually see an NFL season happening with or without fans? And how will it affect you? Like, what would you love to see if there's no fans there?
For me, like I said, my goal is to be national. I'm not trying to be local, so I always try not to be biased. I still attend Eagles games because I'm a fan, and it's not only just because I'm a fan of the Eagles. I'm a fan of the entire sport. So I like being able to see guys like you, 2018 when Nick Foles was playing against the Texans. You get to see Tyrann Mathieu playing safety. You get to see Jadeveon. You get to see JJ. And you get to see all these special players up close and personal. So it's always been about that. But just the aspect, to compare it to another sport, it was a little odd. MMA fighters were saying this weekend that they could literally hear the announcers saying, like commentating the fight, and it kind of helped them in a way. They were able to change their approach to the fight itself because they were able to hear those little aspects. And another sport you can compare it to, imagine March Madness without fans there. March Madness, you know what I mean? I don't think the 16 seeds are able to ride the wave and get that hype going with just an empty crowd. So it's just really upsetting, but this looks like it may be the new norm. So it's just something that we have to adapt to. There's always a new evolution to life and something that you have to adapt to. But I'm really hoping the NFL season. The rumor is, you probably know, the preseason's pushed back a little bit around like the teens of September, like 13th range that some people were saying. But it's going to be tough because other seasons, like, it's easy to just cancel a season that hasn't started at all yet. You know what I mean? Like the NBA and the NHL, you've already played 85 to 90% of the games. So it would only be right to finish it out, whether you have to kind of change up the format of everything a little bit. But for a season that hasn't started at all yet, it's a lot easier to cancel. But the thing that is tough is we're all riding, us diehard sports junkies and NFL junkies and everything, and guys connected with the league that close. It's tough. We watch all these guys get drafted, and we want to see the on-field product. We're tired of all the ESPN profiles and reviews and all the film study. I love film study. I do it all the time. But after a while, I want to see what this guy's able to do in the pros instead of watching Jalen Reagor's TCU highlights and watch some of the worst quarterback play I've ever seen. So it's going to be tough, but like I said, there's always a grace period for things, and even when they lift the quarantine and everything, everyone's going to have to slow down the roll and kind of take more precaution. But then again, on the flip side, you can't really let it affect your life like that. You have to just keep going and keep grinding and just live your life the normal way. Just take extra precaution, and that doesn't mean you have to go out of your way like that. You just have to keep in mind and just keep it in the back of your mind. But it is going to be tough to not have an NFL season if that's the route, but it's very understanding and justified.
And then I completely agree with you. I was hoping that they could do something like what the XFL was doing, mic up people, mic up with certain players and the quarterback and sometimes the head coach. That's something I enjoyed with the XFL. However, I didn't like as soon as an opponent picked off somebody that went straight directly to that player and threw a mic in their face. And it's like, come on, man, like you can't keep doing that because it knocks down. They're just coming off their little high with, a defensive stop or, getting a turnover or something like that. And you're throwing a mic in a person's face. They still have that type of energy. So that's one of the things I did not like, but that is something that could be implicated within NBA, NFL, because I actually want to hear what the players are saying. While we're not there physically, we could actually sort of kind of be there and actually hear the trash talking, which I think will be phenomenal. I mean, hell, when we get like basketball back, I want to hear like, the Greek freak talk junk to like LeBron James. You can't stop me. Or, the big guys or something like that. Because while we're not there as fans, because we do uplift them and encourage them and scream at them, like when there's a huge dunk from LeBron James. Like picture that. That's like a 5-on-5 at the YMCA. Yeah. Like it's like without fans or anything like that, they don't have that enthusiasm. It's just like, but when the fans are there after a big dunk, it creates a lot of, noise, and it makes the players feel good about themselves. If they're having a horrible game, the fans kind of uplift them, and it's like, we got your back, we got your back. And I can't imagine football without the 12s. I live in Seattle. So, the 12s, they create a lot of noise. If you actually been to the CenturyLink field, man, it feels like they smother you with their noise. And so just imagine that it's like a scrimmage game. And then you also have to look at it from a marketing aspect. Yes, we're excited for football, but how many people going to actually tune in to watch basically a scrimmage game? I don't know. Are you going to actually be enthusiastic with watching, these teams go at it without fans? Because like I said, most of the time it's like training camp. Some people are not really watching training camp or either preseasons because it's not somebody that they love that's out there. And it's not that many fans out there neither. But now, since we're not there as fans physically, we're going to have to look at it from a broadcasting aspect. But again, they have to do something to kind of entertain fans. And so that's something that's going to be interesting to watch as well, too.
For sure. And a perfect example of that, me being in the Philadelphia area, who's somebody that benefits from fan interaction more than Joel Embiid? When Joel's going for, Joel could have 28, and you look later in the fourth quarter, and now he's got 44 because the crowd's hyping him up, and that's something that gets him going. So, and it's just great to see. And really, like I said, hitting on the March Madness and college sports in general, those Penn State Stadium, USC, the Coliseum, all those places. Imagine them without fans and playing a season. It would just feel completely wrong. Those college atmospheres are completely built off the hype of fans. And like you said, a team that may not be up to caliber with that can really feed off of that energy and ride the wave and create an upset. So it's going to be tough, but this might just be a new transitioning period. And it's just crazy because we've never seen anything like this at all.
Yes, and I'm just trying to figure out a way to get away from politics because that's all we have right now. Yeah. And I'm glad that we have like the Michael Jordan documentary. It inspires me. It brings back so many nostalgic moments with me and my pops and me and my mom watching, especially like the Bulls versus the Knicks. The Knicks, they were like considered the bad boys in that time. And it's just like, watching, Anthony Mason and all those different type of players, it just brings me back to reality because now I'm 33 years old, but some of the good matchups I totally forgot. And, I get tired of this whole, comparison between Michael Jordan and LeBron James, and people forget about Kobe Bryant. At the end of the day, Kobe Bryant had 5 rings. Like if you look at the spots that he took his shots at, it's identical to Jordan. With LeBron James, he's an improved version of Magic Johnson. He's a facilitator. Hell, you could throw him up there and compare him with Scottie Pippen.
Yes, sir. And that was Scottie Pippen was the start of the point forward era. And like you said, LeBron James has always been my favorite player. And non-biasedly, I actually do think he's the greatest player of all time just because of the skill standpoint. And everybody that I appreciate the winning and guys like Michael Jordan, for sure. He was a great winner and he's 1B to me, in my personal opinion. It's just I kind of don't like the argument where it's so dead set on the winning aspect and just the overall aspect. Like LeBron James, the only player of all time to have 27,000 points, 7,000 assists, and 7,000 rebounds. That takes a special caliber player to be able to do that. And we're talking about a guy that was selling pay-per-views in Ohio as an 18-year-old. No one's doing that. You know what I mean? But then again, you can say the same thing about all the guys I put in the GOAT conversation. I put Michael Jordan in there, LeBron James, and Wilt Chamberlain. Who's averaging 50 points and 25 rebounds in a season? Nobody besides Wilt Chamberlain. You know what I mean? And getting 55 rebounds in a playoff game. Nobody. But then again, who's like Michael Jordan, where he wins 3 championships, is able to put basketball aside at the highest athlete has ever been considered in the world and go live a dream out for his deceased father and then come back to the game and then win another 3 championships. You know what I mean? That just takes a special person. And hitting on Kobe Bryant, RIP to Kobe Bryant. It's been a really, really tough year for basketball in general. It was really tough to see that happen. Anybody that loves basketball, it's a really emotional subject. I sat there and I didn't believe the news. Like I saw it like right when it hit. I think it was 2. That's like type of news you can tell exactly where you were. I think it was Eastern time. It was like 2:20, like exactly 2:22. I saw the article on a Sunday morning. It was the night after LeBron had just passed Kobe on the all-time scoring list in Philly, where Kobe's from. And it was just so tough. But with Kobe is, I don't think people really appreciate him to the highest power, especially like LeBron fans like myself. I appreciate him, but there's a lot of LeBron fans that kind of just like get more personal about the argument. But a lot of people don't appreciate him as much because he was a Michael Jordan clone, but everybody wanted to be Michael Jordan. But who was able to do it? Only Kobe Bryant. You know what I mean? He was the closest thing there was, and he was the only one that was able to even get there. And how many guys do you see now that are inspired by Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant himself? You see guys like Kyrie, they were getting trained by Kobe before he passed. Giannis was working out with him in the summer, and all those guys, it's inspiring because for those three guys, the generational cutoff, you had Michael Jordan, who was emerging really huge after Bird and Magic and Isaiah Thomas right after that era. Then you had Akeem and Tim and Shaq coming up at that time, but Shaq was more so in the Kobe era. That next generation in between LeBron and Michael Jordan, the two argued greatest players of all time, that's the Kobe Bryant era with Tracy McGrady and Vince Carter and all those guys. So that was a huge era that meant a lot to me, being 23 years old now. And that was when I first started trying to comprehend basketball. And I remember 4 years old when I first had an eye and kind of understood things on a minor scale. And the Lakers went 15-1 in the playoffs. And their one loss was to the Sixers in the finals in an overtime game. And that was the iconic Tyronn Lue step-over play. So just Kobe Bryant just means a lot to the basketball world. And I, like you said, I just wish that all these comparisons could just go down the drain and we can just appreciate guys. They were all in different eras. You know what I mean? Like Kobe passed the torch to LeBron, Michael Jordan passed the torch to Kobe, and so forth. And now you see LeBron doesn't want to pass the torch at all at the age of 35. He's trying to hold on to it as long as he can. But you got guys like Giannis and Kawhi Leonard and even Kevin Durant, who was always like the second guy towards LeBron. Like if LeBron doesn't exist, Kevin Durant is argued probably a top five greatest player of all time. Who's another guy, like you said, talking about guys who have done things that other. Who's a guy pulling up in LeBron James' face to end the finals? Regardless if he joins the Warriors or not, who's pulling up in LeBron James' face to end the finals? You know what I mean? And people always want to hold Kevin Durant accountable for joining that. And I was very upset. That was another news I could tell you exactly where I was in July, where he signed with the Warriors. But it's not like he was just getting an A+ on a group project for nothing. You know what I mean? This guy was a finals MVP twice in a row with a guy like Steph Curry and a guy like Klay Thompson and a guy like Draymond Green on his team. So I just wish all the comparisons with the basketball greats could just go out the window and we can appreciate these guys. They all do different things that others can't. You know what I mean? We got guys like Dirk, who set the non-platform shot where he's kicking his leg up, this, that, the other, and just ripping the shots from all over the place, 7 foot. And then, like you said, an evolutionized version of Magic Johnson's LeBron James. Kevin Durant's kind of the evolutionized version of Dirk Nowitzki, where he's a little bit more athletic and he can handle the rock and he's just pulling up off the dribble instead of catch and shoot at 7 foot. So I wish everybody could just appreciate these guys for actually what they are instead of trying to compare them, because there's no really comparison, because it's not like football where these guys had that dead set job and they may like their set plays ran. These guys are improvisers and creative. Their basketball game takes them where they go. There's never a normal play like the LeBron James play where he goes behind the back and somehow the ball nutmegs a Sixers defender. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. It's iconic. You know what I mean? So, like I said, I just wish all the comparisons could go out the window, especially with the passing of Kobe Bryant, and we could all just appreciate it. Like I said, I'm the biggest LeBron fan there is. Had his jersey 7 years old and the Nike Zoom LeBron 2s. I'm also a sneakerhead. The Nike Zoom LeBron 2s, I had them as well. But I enjoy the Jordan documentary as much as anybody else because it's information that I've been filled in. I know 70% of the story, but that other 30% I'm being filled in on, and it's great. I love it. I'm so hype every Sunday night. Like I said, I have to be up very, very early, but every Sunday night I have to lock in and watch those episodes because I feel like I'm missing out if I don't.
Exactly. And then Kobe Bryant was my idol, and I had the opportunity to be around him last year when I was covering an Aces game, and it was crazy because I interviewed Derek Fisher. I'm a diehard Lakers fan. Yeah. So it was pretty cool just to be around people that actually have rings, somebody that you look up to. And then when they announced it on a PA system, it's like, yeah, Kobe Bryant and his daughter are here. And it was crazy because a lot of media outlets was like, clubbering around Kobe Bryant. So I didn't get the opportunity to talk with Kobe Bryant, but I got to be around him. I actually talked with his daughter for like maybe like 2 seconds. I just told her that I see greatness in her and just keep it up. And she was like, "Oh yeah, thank you." And like I already knew that Kobe and his daughter was going to change the WNBA world. You have to look at it from a like everything I do now these days is looking at it from a marketing aspect. You bring in Kobe Bryant, that's just a big name, and then his daughter, who's not going to want to see Kobe Bryant and his daughter. She already had the traditional fundamentals about the game at an early age, and hell, she's Kobe Bryant's daughter. Like since you didn't watch Kobe Bryant as a player, you could watch him as a coach because he was coaching an AAU team.
And that passion translates too.
Yes. And so, as we had mentioned before, I wanted to do an interview this year. That was one of my goals, to interview Kobe Bryant. Like I'm here, and it's just like, oh my gosh, then he had passed away. So the next person I really want to interview, there's a couple of them actually, like, outside of sports, it's Adele. I love Adele's story. I love her as a person. I want to interview Denzel Washington. He's a phenomenal actor. I love him. I love his inspiring stories of how he overcame a lot of adversity, and became one of the greatest actors that we have today. I actually want to interview Jordan, and get his take on a lot of different things. It's just a lot of people that I want to interview, and I've been in the game for maybe like almost 8 years. So I cover like a tons of NFL, but as far as like the NBA's is concerned, I want to cover that a little bit more. I used to cover the Hornets from time to time when I was in Virginia. So every other weekend I would go to Charlotte and cover the game. But just being around Kobe Bryant, like that's my idol. I picked up a basketball because of Kobe Bryant. I was number 8 all day. I was never a 24 fan. I was number 8 all day. Without 8, you don't have 24. And he 100%. He was just vicious, and his mindset. And I tell people all the time, y'all want to have the Mamba mentality. Y'all don't understand the Mamba mentality, because when you have the Mamba mentality, you battling internally within yourself. You have all these goals, and you're battling yourself. You're not battling your so-called haters. You're not battling, the outside world. You're not battling, the negativity. You're battling yourself. It's like, how can I improve myself on a daily basis? And that's how my mindset is. Each and every day, if I don't get, 3 connections or get some interviews for my clients or different things of that nature, I have yet to done anything with my life. And you just have that mindset because it makes you a better individual. It makes you a better leader. And you can excel to a greater level in your occupation.
100%. Some of the people that I looked up to that were my inspiration and role models growing up, obviously Joe Flacco, being so closely connected to him and being able to see a South Jersey kid actually live out his dream and play in the NFL and aspirations that high and being that connected to him. Also LeBron James, just everything from day one, he was put on this pedestal and he's lived up to it, or if not surpassed it. If you said how many guys are supposed to be one of the greatest players of all time, and then now actually has himself in the conversation with a guy so great as Michael Jordan, like that's just absolutely ridiculous. And they put him 16 years old on Slam magazine covers, saying he's the next Michael Jordan, and now 19 years down the road, 35, he's getting even better, and he's already been in the league for how long? Guys like that, guys like Adrian Peterson, who tears his ACL. That's my favorite football player of all time. Tears his ACL, and what's he do? He's 6 weeks after tearing his ACL and his PCL, is up a hill outrunning all of his teammates with guys like Percy Harvin and Sidney Rice on the team. And later that season, he rushes for 2,000 yards. But the best part about that entire story about that season is he won an MVP for running back, and he was 6 yards. It was either 6 or 9 yards away from breaking the all-time leading rushing record for a season. He chose the route to make the playoffs with the Minnesota Vikings instead of pushing for that extra 9 yards to break the record. And that just shows a team aspect and a team player. And he's faced a lot of adversity. His dad never really got to see him play because he was in jail for a really long time, and just stuff like that. Guys like in the music world, Wiz Khalifa, just always positive energy at all times. It's always about positive energy, always uplifting people, and what can I do to help you out. So people like that, I've always really built myself off that positive energy and people like that. Because you look at Michael Jordan, and we learn about with this documentary, he was a great player and he won at all costs, but at times he could really be tough to deal with as a team, and especially like you saw certain guys saying on there that like Udonis Haslem actually just said that he knows he's the best player of all time and he played with LeBron. But one to thing, not to get sidetracked, but one thing about that is people that always want to say, why are LeBron's teammates always saying that Michael Jordan's the best player of all time? They grew up idolizing Michael Jordan as a child. You know what I mean? It's different than being a teammate and being a peer with somebody and someone being your idol and your role model. You know what I mean? So that's a different whole nother story. But at times, like you said, when Udonis Haslem even said himself, a guy that's an OG in the league, one of the most OG guys, like Juwan Howard sitting on the bench for the Heat for a long time too, is now the Michigan coach too. It was tough to deal with him at times and at the all by any means. And you could say the same about Kobe Bryant, but he was making his teammates better. And what I always valued about LeBron James was he was able to get that out of his teammates, but also be positive while he was doing it. And there's no wrong or right way to do it. Like you saw, there's 11 championships combined between Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant for a reason. You know what I mean? And Phil Jackson, he's another great. He's arguably the greatest coach of all time who coached both of them. And he had both of them buy into the triangle offense, which took their game from already having that ridiculous talent, scoring 61 in playoff games and stuff. But he took that to the next level, and it's the guidance. And that's something that LeBron really hasn't ever had for himself. He's never had that top-tier coach. They were hiring overseas coach Platt, and then he's getting fired, and then you got Ty Lue coming into the mix, but LeBron has always had to kind of dig into that role himself. So like I said, you can say different stuff about all these different guys, but those are the guys that kind of just inspired me growing up. And especially I would have been more inspired. I was buying Tracy McGrady kicks along with the LeBron James kicks back in the day. So that was another guy that inspired me. It was just tough to see him derailed by injuries, but guys like outside of LeBron, I was so dead set on him, but I've always admired guys like Tracy McGrady, Vince Carter, and Kobe Bryant, and just the OGs, Dwight Howard in his prime, and guys like that were always hungry, and they always had that positive aspect to them in a way. But there's other ways to bring stuff out of them and to test people's character and test them truly with the right meaning behind it. That's what stuff that Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan did that got them those championships. So I appreciate that aspect. And like I said, there's no right or wrong way to do it. There's so many different ways to bring the best out of people, and everybody is different. You just have to kind of tap into that. Like guys like you saw with the documentary, Scott Burrell, he's a really nice guy, and maybe you can't come at him the same way that you got Steve Kerr, who's going to throw a punch back at the GOAT. You know what I mean? So it's a whole nother thing. You just got to understand people in general. But those were just the people that inspired me growing up. And if you're talking about interviews that I have on the road, obviously I put LeBron on there. That's big time. I put Adrian Peterson on there, big time as well. A guy I would love to interview as well that would be on that list, who, being a sneakerhead, has a lot of weight in the community. I'd love to talk to PJ Tucker and just about how his whole entire story, being an undersized center and this age, being 6'5" and being the center of his team with the Houston Rockets, but it's also how he's coming up with the craziest kicks that Kevin Durant doesn't even have on his own shoes and playing against them in them and stuff like that. And you saw with the Jordan documentary, he put on the OG kicks to bust OG ass, like he said, and he got his toes bleeding and everything. But for us OG sneakerheads, that was always what it was about. I remember I would pull up in youth basketball. I would have Kobe. I had the Kobe Cheetah LeBron, or the Kobe Cheetah Christmas 7s on with the ankle supports and everything. They're purple, red laces, yellow, all over the place. And I got blisters and everything, but it was all about me repping Kobe Bryant and having the nicest kicks on there. You know what I mean? It was stuff like that. So that's stuff that's always inspired me. So.
And I definitely concur with you about the leadership role. And that's where we have that debate, because like with LeBron James, he's not, and just my personal opinion, he don't have that killer instinct. He's just starting now to get it. Like in the last 3 years, he started, taking the last shot. Most of the time, he's a facilitator. He usually get his teammates involved. And my whole thing is with Kobe and MJ, I respect them because they let the organizations build around those individuals. With LeBron James, and like as you stated before, there's no right or wrong reason with it. But I mean, you tag team and go to Miami with D Wade, and everybody wants to talk about LeBron James, and he's like one of the best leaders as well as the best player on the planet. But yet you had to have help with a Miami bench, D Wade, and Chris Bosh. And D Wade at the time, and we know LeBron had to sacrifice, averaging points and the way Wade got his. But my whole thing is, you go to Miami, where there's another superstar that's already out there, and tag team with him to get your rings. Whereas we saw what I think the last year he was with the Cavaliers. I mean, you bring in Derrick Rose, you bring in what is his name? He used to play Darren Williams. And these are the people that's supposed to be your backup guards that could definitely, help out the bench. And that didn't happen. And as you stated before, they didn't really have chemistry within a coach. So my whole aspect with LeBron James, he's a great leader. But as far as like pushing somebody, I just don't really see the pushing aspects. He's going to encourage you, which I love, but he's not going to get, 110% with you. Because like, look what happened with when we had Dwight Howard the first time. What Kobe Bryant said, you're soft. And mind you, I was pissed off at Dwight Howard because at the time he was, he was the number one center in the league at the time. And second was Andrew Bynum. And you telling me you got other guys that are bullying you in the paint? No, that's not supposed to happen. And when you come to LA, you're supposed to have a type of caliber of offense that you play with. You have to have that killer mentality. And right now, what we're seeing with LeBron James, been in LA his second year, he's starting to have that killer instinct. It's just the LA way.
I do respect your opinion on that, but being such a LeBron historian myself, I've watched so much so I can hit back on games where talking about Dwight Howard taking the last shot and hitting that shot versus the Magic, where the Magic went on to win that series and go to the finals. And I think they lost to the Lakers that year. LeBron James hits the top of the key three. And I understand where you're coming from, that direction where you want to see your guy take all the weight on his shoulders like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan did and take that last shot. But that's always been the thing about LeBron James. He's not trying to be the most personal guy out there. He's not trying to make the name for himself. He's able to sit back and is like, all right, Steph Curry, he's the MVP, but he's also getting thrown into pick and roll defending situations at all costs. And you saw they used to have J.R. Smith hugging his guy and throwing him onto literally Kyrie Irving. And what happened? Kyrie Irving actually hit that shot in Game 7 of the Finals 3 different times in that season as game winners in that exact spot of the court. So LeBron knew that in the back of his mind after already making the pin down block, bulletin board block, in my opinion, the greatest defensive play in any sports history. And he's able to set aside. He's like, all right, I'm going to let the kid go to work. And you saw Kyrie has that Mamba mentality. You know what I mean? Kyrie was trained by Kobe Bryant, and that's his idol. So he's like, yeah, LeBron, give me the ball. Yeah, I'm 100% down to do it. And you saw what was their falling out. He hated all the comparisons of LeBron being, and it was blown out of proportion when you're trying to compare it to the guy's dad. You know what I mean? That's just completely outlandish. You know what I mean? I love LeBron James as much as anybody else, but if you ever try and compare him to the mentor of like what my dad has done for me in my life, that's just a whole nother aspect of things. So that's just really disrespectful. And for Kyrie Irving, he really took offense to that, but you saw he apologized because he ended up realizing what LeBron James was completely about. And it was like, yeah, at times I'm trying to get the best players and the most talented teams, and it always doesn't work out when you grab Isaiah Thomas on the same team. Like you said, Darren Williams, who was talking about Darren Williams. He's one of my most underrated players of all time. He was an absolute killer. That's people. But if you didn't watch basketball in the 2000s decade to the 2010s, I remember him baptizing the Sixers, just going 70% shooting, hitting threes like at will. And another guy that also fits that mold is Andre Miller, who played for the Sixers, another really underrated point guard. But guys like that, it isn't always about having the most talent on your team. It's about what guys are able to buy into that role and what they're able to do for you. So something that I appreciated about being a historian of basketball and not just letting myself, being 23 years old, only know about recent memory. YouTube is a great thing. You can go back and watch various different things. You have NBA TV, and they show full game clips of the 80s, and you can watch all those eras of basketball. And something that I really appreciated about the 90s to the early 2000s era, right before LeBron even joined, was I watched, I think it was 2003 Game 3 Western Conference semifinals, and it was the Dallas Mavericks with Steve Nash still on the team and Dirk, obviously, versus the Sacramento Kings with Mike Bibby. Chris Webber had just torn his meniscus the game before, so he wasn't playing. And so you had also Finley on the other team, another extremely underrated player who played for a lot of good teams. But getting back to what the point of it was, in that game, you're already down Chris Webber, and that game I think went into either double or triple overtime, trading shots for shots, and it's not the Stars even trading the shots for shots. They had a guy on the Mavericks foul out, the starting power forward fouled out, and the 14th guy comes off the bench and scores 15 points from the fourth quarter on. And that just shows back in that era, those guys just had that mentality where nowadays you're not going to get Matthew Dellavedova scoring the game-winning bucket for you. You know what I mean? You're going to have to have an extremely skilled player to come through in that moment. So that's something I really noticed about the older era of basketball, even though the workout regimens and everything has gotten better to where you're producing these crazy athletes like Zion Williamson, 6'7", apparently over 300 pounds right now, and he has a 45-inch vertical leap. You know what I mean? There's not too many of those guys walking around like that in that era, but those guys came ready to play, and mentally they were a lot more established and ready to go than some of the guys that we see nowadays.
Exactly. And the last subject I want to talk about, because, I got to jet off in a few.
Yes, sir.
But my whole thing is, what's the question I was going to ask you? What do you think the season is going to be as far as with the NBA as well as MLB? Do you think with the MLB, do you think it's going to be in Arizona or Florida? And with the NBA, they're projected to actually start their season down in Vegas. Do you think that will happen, or would you want that to happen?
I think just comparing the two sports in general, I was actually talking to somebody about this baseball and basketball wise. Like I said earlier, it's going to be tough. You have to pretty much resume the season if you can, because you already played so many of those games, especially with the NHL as well. But with the MLB, you haven't started the season yet. But then again, it's unlike any other sport where it's almost playoff series format at all times. It's the best of three. You know what I mean? You're going out to a city and you're going out. And if you travel to the West Coast or the East Coast, you're going to hit all those teams at one time. So it might be a lot easier for the logistics of that to happen just based off of where you play series in baseball and you're able to go to one city and stay there and kind of play like the LA Angels. You can play them and you can play other LA teams, the Dodgers, teams like Oakland. But the NBA, it's going to be tough to really find that format because what? Do you eliminate how many games are in a playoff series? And that adds a big asterisk to the whole picture of what people actually see is the product and what happens for the results of the season. So it's going to be tough to really find out the logistics for that. But like I said, I feel like a lot more promising towards the MLB season happening because they travel out into one spot, and you can kind of go off the spring training setups and how those are set up, like the Phillies play in Springwater, Clearwater down there in Florida, and you can kind of set it up on those type of things. But basketball is going to be a little bit more tricky because do you jump straight into the playoffs? Do you have a grace period where you have a couple games? Like I said, how many games are in the playoff series? Like they used to run the best of 5 series in the first round.
Oh, so you do remember that?
Yeah. I told you I'm a historian. I'm 23 years old, but being in this industry, I'm extremely passionate about it. And I've never let myself talk about a subject that I don't know about. You know what I mean? Like I said, Michael Jordan, perfect example. He's never going to ask his teammate to do something that he didn't do himself. So exactly. I'm never going to talk about something or bring something to light that I've never personally experienced or have any knowledge of. So I try and be as vast as I can, dating back to the 80s. It's hard to get into the 70s and 60s with Oscar Robertson and Will Chamberlain, as much him being from Philadelphia. I try to be. But back to the 80s, I try and be a historian of the game and know things like that. So maybe you take some aspects from older basketball and maybe you cut down the initial series to maybe 3 games. And then moving forward, since it's a grace period and not knowing really what things are, maybe make the second and third rounds and the championship round 5 games. But I think a lot of fans would feel some type of way, honestly, if it was only 3 games, like especially in the final series. You know what I mean? Because a perfect example, the Warriors had 3 wins on the Cavs, and the Cavs had 1 win. What happens? LeBron James comes back, and they win the finals. And Kyrie and LeBron go for 41 each in Game 5. And my personal favorite LeBron play of all time
Oh
is
Lord.
when he blocked Steph Curry
I
in
knew
Game
I knew I
Six.
knew I knew that was
Blocked
coming.
Steph Curry. Everyone talks about the block in Game 7 where he pins it against the backboard and the tie game. I go to Game 6. Steph Curry's the unanimous MVP, the 2-time MVP in Cleveland, gets the move that he gets everybody on the fake up and under. LeBron's like, I know you. I know what you're about to do. Swats it out of bounds, turns around, and this is when people say LeBron doesn't have the killer instinct. This solidified it for me. He goes, I don't know exactly what he said, but he was somewhere to the effect is, I'm still here. I'm still the king. It's my throne. So that just in itself, just seeing LeBron lock in like that and how emotional he was, that play in itself, I'm like, oh my God, if this gets to a Game 7, there's no telling what's about to happen right now. So just little stuff like that. And if I could go back and change one play in history of a sport, LeBron James finishing that and one dunk on Draymond Green to end the Game 7 2016 finals. If that dunk would have went in, that would have ended Draymond Green's life. That would have brought LeBron from already another level to what he was already on. So that just shows my passion. I just remember those moments so passionately. But that's then again, I'm bringing up playoff memories. I want to see the NBA playoffs played. I saw 85% of the playoffs this year, or 85% of the NBA season already this year. I want to have those moments and be able to cherish those middle moments. Like last year, I was bringing up to a couple friends. I was like, I'm a low key huge DJ Augustine fan, and guys like him and Darren Collison, who are kind of the under the radar ball handlers that are a little undersized. DJ Augustine, a lot of people forget, he started the playoffs last year hitting a game-winning shot to go up 1-0 on the NBA Finals champions, the Toronto Raptors and Kawhi Leonard. So it's those little moments like that we're really going to be missing out on, where in the NBA regular season, there's not as many people tuned into the games, and it's not really as hyped like that. So it's going to be really tough if they don't resume the season. But like I said, with other things like the NFL, it's definitely justified, but it's going to be really tough for somebody as passionate like me and just being a sports junkie. I really want to see these played out. And it's really a shame for guys like Giannis and LeBron James, and they all were on a conference call yesterday showing their stance on it. They all want the season to resume. And you have all the OGs saying, oh, no, I think it's good or whatever, but they're not playing anymore. They're living vicariously through these athletes. So you got to put yourself in these guys' shoes. They work so hard in the offseason with the trainers, guys like CJ McCollum that never really get the light of day, that go in Game 7 and hold Damian Lillard's weight versus the Nuggets last year when Damian shot like 3 of 14 and CJ went crazy. Those guys train so hard in the offseason to get those moments and finally have a team like the Portland Trailblazers break through the West and be in the conference finals. So all those little cherishable moments are tough to throw out the window and not have this year. But like I said, it's definitely going to be justified if the NBA doesn't resume its season and just calls it quits. But on the MLB aspect, like I said, I think it's going to be a lot easier to figure out how to navigate behind it with so many games being played in series. Obviously, going to have to limit the games, but being in one general area and being able to hit so many games at one time, I think there is a way to get around it. But just the no fan aspect, man, it's going to be really, really tough and awkward, honestly, to see.
And I definitely agree with all your points as far as with both organizations is concerned. With the NBA, like I said, I'm ready for it to come back. You know, I want to see if Zion can bring the Pelicans into that 8th position. I mean,
guys like that, not to cut you off, but Ja Morant and Zion, rookies putting themselves in position to win a couple games out of a playoff spot in the West. You know what I mean? After they just traded Anthony Davis, and they're not supposed to be anything. So,
and I definitely want to see that aspect. And then I want to see if somehow, some way, the Lakers versus Clippers. I think the Clippers got the number. They're a little bit deeper than the Lakers. The Lakers big men, they cannot stay out of foul trouble. That's going to be their Achilles heel. Like, we cannot stay out of foul trouble, and we're large. And so you have a team that is like with the Clippers. They have a lot to prove. With the Lakers don't have too much to prove, but the Clippers have always been like that little brother team. And so they have the right players, and they're very deep within their depth. And so that's going to be interesting to see. And then you got the Houston Rockets playing small ball. We want to actually see, you know, if that's going to propel them to actually go deep or either less in the playoffs. And I feel like, you know, if they play somebody like, you know, the Lakers, they're going to get eaten up alive in the post position, because I think the tallest player for the 66, for the Rockets is I think 6'6", if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, 6'6", 6'7", Robert Covington.
Yeah.
So
yes. So that's going to be pretty interesting to watch. And then, of course, you know, with the East, the East is wide open too. You got the Raptors, you got the Celtics. Hell, you got the 76ers. 76ers, I mean, they was the fifth or sixth
Yeah,
seed.
and they actually benefited from this whole thing because Ben Simmons was injured right after the All-Star break, and now they have the whole grace period. He was cleared last week, so the NBA resumes. But just to hit on your point, there's so many unanswered storylines for the NBA that I want to see these matchups. And NBA basketball is like no other, especially with the talent that they're pumping out now. 10th team in the West right now is probably the New Orleans Pelicans, and they got one of the most hype generational players that we've seen coming in a long time. So, man. Yeah. Well, let me ask you one last question before we get out of here.
Okay.
Speaking of the NBA playoff format, I actually talked about this on my podcast with my partner Nick D'Amelio yesterday. Do you think they should change to a 1-16 format instead of just 8-8 from each conference?
No, I say, don't change something that is already working for you, to be honest. I like this. This is the best of the best. Just me personally, I just love the idea. Just don't change it. Because once we see it with the NFL, you start changing things and it doesn't really work out. You saw it with the pass interference call. Prime example, it seemed like it was there to stay, but then all of a sudden it didn't work. It's the same thing with the NBA. Hell, you got the NBA right now that's trying to change up, calling a foul, challenging a foul. Don't change up anything. Basketball is basketball, football is football. So don't just change it up. I like the seeding. And what are your thoughts about it?
For sure. My thoughts on it are, I kind of go either ways. I see pros and cons to it, where maybe the best product and the best teams do get in, but if you are one of the best teams, you should be able to make 1-8 in your conference. You know what I mean? So it may work for the best, where you would probably see, I would say, 10 West teams and maybe 6 East teams. So it might make a better play. I actually was talking about yesterday on my podcast, where maybe they kind of cut down the number in itself. Maybe only 6 teams from each conference make it, and then you get a 1-6 matchup, and it's a little bit more competitive throughout. So, but then again, you can look at history and what did the Golden State Warriors do to that Dallas Mavericks 1 seed?
I was just about to say. And
then, there's always pros and cons, and there's always a Venn diagram to things and different aspects that you have to kind of just consider with everything. But it's definitely a conversation, and these type of conversations are very interesting because a lot of people may not be thinking about a certain ideology or logistics behind something, and they bring it to light. It's like, wow, I may have never thought about that, but I think that's a great idea. So, like you said, the NFL backfired with its Nickel Roby-Coleman rule. You know what I mean? Exactly, basically off of him. But then again, so many people in that game are so caught up on that play. But one, a running back on the Saints ran out of bounds to keep the clock from running. Two, a top 5 quarterback of all time got the ball first in overtime, and he could have ended the game if he scores a touchdown. What happens? The ball gets tipped going to Michael Thomas, who he force-fed all the time, and it's picked. And now the entire game's flip-flopped. So there's little rules. I don't try and get caught up on them because there's always more to it. Like, you look at the actual game, what happened. It wasn't just that exact play. The Saints got the ball with Drew Brees, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, to start that playoff or start that overtime. So if they go down and score, which the Saints offense is as high powered, especially now with Emmanuel Sanders in the fold this year, as any other team, they should have went down and just handled business, in my opinion.
And then it's just I get where you're coming from, but then you got to call it. It's very blatant.
No, I'm not saying that. That was a horrible. That looked like I was playing Madden. I pressed down on the hit stick and I just drilled you. You know what I mean? But then again, that play happened, and there was a lot more opportunities in general for the New Orleans Saints to come away with a victory and proceed into the playoffs. So even though it would have probably been better for the league if the Saints, but you can look back on the flip side. How many times is Alshon Jeffrey dropping a pass like that in the game before? You know what I mean? So I don't even want to bring it up. That was the greatest start to an Eagles game I've ever seen. Russell Douglas picking off Drew Brees in the first quarter on the first play, I believe. And Drew Brees is fumbling snaps. 16 years into his career, is fumbling snaps in the playoffs. 16 years into his career. So I thought that game was on lock, but then you saw how good the Saints actually are. But like I said, there's so much more to than just looking at one play of the game, especially in a football game. Each offense gets 70 plays, and then there's how many special teams plays. And special teams, I go 33% on all aspects because I know they didn't win the Super Bowl, but getting a charge like Devin Hester taking back the opening kickoff in a Super Bowl when you know how deadly he is, and then him on the biggest stage showing his value and bringing it to the crib, stuff like that shows you the aspect of all of football where every single side of the ball matters. So my feeling on that is just it's a little tough to switch up the playoff formats in general in any sport, but basketball-wise, it's definitely a conversation. But like you said, don't break something that's not broken at all. So I would probably stay with how things are now. In a regular season, though, you know what I mean? During the quarantine is a whole nother story, but during a regular season, I'd probably stay with it for now. But it was great having you on, Fago. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. I know you got to get out of here and go attend to the versatility in your sports media field and the hustle. And that's something, like I told you before the podcast, I really respect. You're somebody that inspires me, where you already have the platform and you don't need to be doing all this extra work, but you want to be great and you want to be special like your idols, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. So you want to put yourself in that tier. And the only way you're going to do that is not being content and hustling every day. So I really, really respect that, Fago. And thank you for taking time out of your day to hop on the podcast with me.
And thank you for having me. And definitely we can do this again, and talk about, the MLB or either NASCAR. Let me ask you this. Are you going to watch the NASCAR series this weekend?
Normally, I don't venture into because I try and balance the sports overlap of MLB, like, November, where you got playoff baseball, basketball starting up, football's in its grind. So football, you got to be locked in. There's so much like news coming out. NBA's daily, you know what I mean? Night to night, West Coast games. I'm on the East Coast, so West Coast games annihilate me. I had to stay up and watch my favorite player of all time. I got to stay up till 10:30 and then stay up till 1 o'clock and then be up early in the morning. So. But without all that going on right now, I probably will definitely tune into the NASCAR this weekend. 100%.
Okay. Oh yeah, we could definitely talk about that. But on this note, got to jet off, got to handle some business. Thank you for allowing me to be on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, sir. Best of luck to you. Thank you.
All right, now. Bye-bye.